Namaskar, ladies and gentlemen. In these difficult times of lockdown and the regular work not being possible, the initiative taken by the Madras Bar Association to have this web series lectures is very useful to the legal fraternity. I appreciate the Madras Bar Association for starting this web series by which members of the bar and the other viewers would be benefited by the learning which they get from a number of persons who are experts in the field of law. The topic for today is the fundamental rights during the pandemic. The World Health Organization has declared the present COVID-19 to be a pandemic. To start with, it is necessary to find out the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic. And going back in history to understand what these epidemics are, Hippocrates, in his books on epidemic, which he wrote in the 4th century BC, has referred to upper respiratory problems which developed in a human body due to influenza. The first pandemic, which is a larger version of an epidemic. Epidemic is restricted to a particular area or region, whereas a pandemic is of a larger area or worldwide. The first pandemic which was recorded occurred in the Roman Empire, which was during the days of Justinian. This was in the 6th century BC. And due to the trade which was being carried out by the empire with China and other places, food grains were imported and rats also came with the food grains carrying fleas. The pandemic was there for about 225 years, and half of Europe was affected by this. There is a place called Prato in the northern parts of Italy. In 1630-31, Prato had about 5,000 people living in the city, living in the small town of Prato then. There was a flu which came through soldiers who came to that area. It started spreading in Prato. Persons who were affected by the virus were isolated, quarantined as we use the word now. Persons who are related to those who are quarantined were also taken care of, isolated. Hospitals were full of persons who were afflicted with the disease. There was a close down of the town. All economic activities came to a standstill. The municipality had to take care of all the needs of the people. 1,500 people died. A similar situation which we are seeing on a smaller scale. Ironically, Prato, which is a much developed city in the northern part of Italy now, with a population of 2 lakhs, is very badly affected by this virus. The funny thing is, 50,000 of the 2 lakh people living in Prato are of Chinese origin, and there is not even one case amongst persons of the Chinese origin of COVID-19. Why I refer to Prato is only for the purpose of highlighting the importance of restrictions that can be placed by the governments. The last plague, which was a pandemic which none of us have seen, happened in 1918, when a large number of people died due to the plague. In view of the declaration by the World Health Organization that the present crisis is a pandemic, almost all the countries where the virus has spread have taken initiatives to contain the spread of the virus. What are the initiatives mainly taken? We will focus on those initiatives and how they affect the fundamental rights of an individual in a democracy. Countries responded, some of them slowly, some of them with alacrity, to declare a lockdown. The result of the lockdown is almost a curfew situation where people are not permitted to move, persons lost employment, resulting in loss of livelihood and loss of basic amenities like food, shelter, clothing for a large number of people below the poverty line in this country. What would be the duties of a state in such situations? Which is the provision, or which are the provisions in the Constitution which refer to the duties and responsibilities of a state in public health emergencies like this? Part 4 of the Constitution of India deals with directive principles of state policy. Though these directive principles of state policy are not enforceable in courts of law, they are to be taken into account by the government while making laws. Any law made by the government should be on the basis of the principles that are laid down in the directive principles of state policy. That is what Article 37 of the Constitution says. Without taking you to the other provisions of the directive principles, I will straightaway refer to Article 47 of the Constitution of India, which says that there is a primary duty on the part of the state to protect public health. In no uncertain terms, Article 47 imposes an obligation on the state to protect public health. When I deal with the fundamental rights, I will also stress on the duty of the state in not only protecting health, but also in making facilities to ensure that the health of all these citizens is protected or is taken care of. In view of the lockdown, there are certain fundamental rights of the individuals in this country which are affected adversely. Fundamental rights are dealt with in Part 3 of the Constitution of India. And for the purpose of this talk, I would be referring to only those fundamental rights which would be affected by the imposition of a lockdown or restrictions that are placed by the government in an attempt to improve public health. Where have these fundamental rights come from? It is interesting to note that while making the Constitution, we have borrowed certain provisions from the American Constitution and the Irish Constitution. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was made, and Thomas Jefferson was the person who was in charge of preparing the Declaration of Independence. 10 years thereafter, the Bill of Rights was formulated under the leadership of James Madison. Both Thomas Jefferson and James Madison have made it clear that at that point of time, the human rights that were recognized by the Constitution are those which were part of an individual, and the rights were not those that are conferred by the government. What is the position of the fundamental rights in our country? The fundamental rights that are guaranteed to all citizens, and some of them to even non-citizens, are rights which are primordial rights. They are traditionally natural rights which are inseparable from human existence, and they are preserved by the Constitution. In other words, the Constitution recognizes the natural rights of every human being, which were there even prior to the Constitution being brought into force. Who are the persons who are really affected by the clampdown? For the past 1 month, all of us have not been going to work. Persons who have the facility can bear the burden of sitting at home, but there are those who are underprivileged, who are poor, who are dependent on their work. The lockdown has resulted in their loss of work and livelihood. When the lockdown was announced, the large number of migrant labor we have, the number of which is estimated to be more than 4 crores, have found themselves in a distressed state of affairs, not knowing how long the lockdown would continue, and not knowing whether they would be surviving for a long period of time with the meager savings they had. A large number of these migrant labor started thinking that there is no way they can survive and they should get back to their hometowns or villages. Some of them started trekking hundreds of kilometers by not being able to find a place to stay at the place of their work. Most of them working in unorganized sectors or living as vendors in towns and cities found that their existence would be doubtful. They were more bothered about survival. They were more bothered whether they would be dying out of hunger, forget about the disease itself. These are persons who started walking. At some point of time, the state governments have taken over. They were not permitted to continue their journey back home. They were put in shelter homes. Directions were issued by the governments to take care of the basic amenities like food, shelter, clothing, and even their medical care. time passes, when there was an extension of the lockdown, there was some unrest amongst these persons. There is a debate as to whether these migrant labor have to be transported back to their hometowns or whether they should be asked to stay at the places where they are by being taken care of till a decision is taken after April 3rd. What is it that they were mainly affected by? As I said, I will be dealing only with those fundamental rights which are affected by the clampdown or lockdown. Broadly, I would say that the right to equality of every citizen in this country is enshrined in Articles 14 to 18. Article 19 deals with the fundamental freedoms that are guaranteed to citizens. Article 21 deals with right to life, and the religious rights are protected under Article 25 and 26. Let me deal with Article 19, because the fundamental problem as it appears is that the movement of citizens of this country has been restricted. The question is whether it can be restricted. In a situation like this, where public health is of prime importance, which is a duty which has to be discharged by the government, in exercise of the powers under the Disaster Management Act 2005, which is the statute which deals with such situations, and the Epidemic Diseases Act, which is an archaic act of 1897, governments have given directions that mobility of human beings should be restricted to arrest the spread of the coronavirus. Restrictions are already there in Article 19 in respect of the freedom of movement, and in accordance with those restrictions, it cannot be said that the restriction which has been placed on the movement of the individuals is unreasonable. It would become unreasonable when it is disproportionate to the need of the hour, which is a point which has to be decided as and when it appears, as and when it arises. There is another problem pertaining to the livelihood of the migrant labor, which I will deal with when I am speaking on Article 21. The other angle which has to be looked at is whether the right, which is a freedom of speech and expression, is at stake. Are there any restrictions that are placed on free speech and expression, which is guaranteed in 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India? Free speech is a valuable right in a democracy. A right to dissent should not be stopped. Only when there is free discussion in a marketplace of ideas, the democracy would survive, and that would definitely improve the personality of human beings. What are the restrictions that are placed? There was a case which came up before the Supreme Court of India on 16th and 23rd of March, when arguments were made about fake news being circulated which are creating panic amongst the public about the disease itself. By then, the Director General of World Health Organization has spoken about the danger of an infodemic being more harmful to the society than the epidemic itself. An incident which was narrated pertained to a gentleman, an Indian residing in USA, who posed as an epidemiologist and predicted that India is going to have 40 to 50 crores of people being affected by the virus and 40 to 50 lakhs of people losing their lives. They started doing rounds not only in the media but also in the social media. And looking at these numbers, definitely there will be panic. On a closer scrutiny, it was found that this man had nothing to do with epidemiology. And the logos that he used of Johns Hopkins University and the Princeton University were also found to be fake. After an order was passed by us saying that we do not intend to stifle public discussion on any topic in the press, we gave a direction to the government to give their official version on a daily basis where briefing is done when the public are informed about the figures, facts, about the measures taken for containment of the disease. Pursuant to the order passed by the Supreme Court, a circular was issued by the Government of India on 2nd of April 2020 by referring to Section 54 of the Disaster Management Act and informing people that spreading fake news which results in panic would be punishable under the Disaster Management Act. Having said that, I again stress on the fact that fundamental right of speech is intact and there is no attempt or no complaint made that the voice of anybody is throttled. The original clear and present danger test, which was followed by the US Supreme Court, underwent a change, and any restriction that can be placed on a fundamental right of speech could be only by following a test which was laid down by the US Supreme Court in Brandenburg versus Ohio, which was a test of imminent lawlessness, which means that any speech which would result in imminent lawlessness, which means that suddenly something is going to happen, that speech cannot be restricted. And Brandenburg versus Ohio was followed and approved by the Supreme Court of India in Aru Bhuyan and the later judgment of Shreya Singhal. So the test that is followed in this country even today is that there cannot be free speech which can be stifled unless there is a situation of an imminent lawlessness happening. What should be done insofar as fundamental right of speech is concerned? As I have already said, that the government has to provide information pertaining to the measures that are being taken, pertaining to the position as it is, pertaining to the situation which is being dealt with. If the correct information is provided to the citizens of this country, that would be better. Now let us speak about religious rights. Article 25 gives a right to every person in this city, in this country, to practice, profess, or propagate his religion subject to public health, apart from other things like public order. Every religious denomination has a right to practice, profess, or propagate the religion subject to public health again. So the restriction is clear in 25 and 26. Congregations not being permitted by the government in an effort to protect public health can be read into Article 25. Social distancing being the norm, to ensure that there is curtailment of the widespread contagion is protected, or is a right that is given to the government, which has rightly been acted upon. Now, the most important right, which is Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Article 21 provides that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. Right to life is not merely animal existence. The Supreme Court of India in Francis Coralie Mullin, by referring to a judgment of the US Supreme Court in Munn versus Illinois, where Justice Field said that mere life is not animal existence, it is something more. Justice Bhagavati said that right to life includes right to live with human dignity. Thereafter, in Bandhuva Mukti Morcha, the Supreme Court said that the right to life, which includes right to dignity, live with dignity, also includes protection of health. Dignity is found in the preamble to the Constitution. Otherwise, you don't see it anywhere in the other fundamental rights. Dignity, human dignity, is a constitutional value which permeates all the fundamental rights. Aaron Barak, the president of the Israeli Supreme Court, said that human dignity as a constitutional value is the factor that unites the human rights into one whole. Individual dignity, human dignity, is different from communitarian dignity. And communitarian dignity results in public health, which is again an obligation which has to be discharged by the state. To live is to live with dignity, is what Justice Chandrachud said in the recent judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy. Right to health is something which has been recognized by the Supreme Court of India and read into Article 21, which is a right which has to be discharged by the state. Right to health being a part of human dignity is not only to be protected, but the state should take positive action to create facilities for the purpose of health of each individual in this country being taken care of. Apart from right to health, living a life of dignity includes food, shelter, and livelihood to be provided to all citizens in this country. Can there be situations where the fundamental rights can be suspended? Is it authorized? Article 359 of the Constitution of India enables the President to issue a notification suspending the fundamental rights in an emergency. And as the provision stands, it says that Article 21 cannot be suspended. During the emergency in 1975, the presidential notification suspending Article 21 and preventing people from approaching the Supreme Court of India by filing petitions under Article 32 have been challenged, and the writ petitions filed were dismissed, upholding the notification in ADM Jabalpur. Justice Khanna wrote the dissenting judgment. Thereafter, in 1978, there was an amendment that was made, that is the 44th Amendment to the Constitution, in which after which the provision reads that Article 21 cannot be suspended. And as it stands, ADM Jabalpur has been reversed in the recent 9-judge judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy. There might be certain situations that arise in view of scarcity of resources. There might be some conflicts, there might be some conundrums which have to be taken care of, and this needs some thought. In view of the rising numbers of persons being affected by the disease and the alarming number of deaths that are occurring, the scarcity of infrastructure and healthcare would come into limelight. The large number of people who were suffering from the disease, who had to be treated, not only in this country, in the other countries, throws up a challenge. When persons who were being affected were being brought to the hospitals in Italy, an association of doctors thought that they do not have the resources to treat all the patients who are coming. And there was a question which had to be answered as to which of the patients have to be preferred for treatment and which of them cannot be treated. The doctor suggested that it should be the younger people who should receive treatment on the basis of utilitarian principles. They might be useful to the country and they haven't seen the world. There's another thought about elderly people being protected and the younger people being sacrificed in view of their experiences in life, families to take care of, and their usefulness to the society. There's a third view which said that first come, first serve principles have to be taken into account. As we understand, when you are talking of human dignity of each individual being protected, how is it that you can make these choices? I'm reminded of a very famous case which was decided by the German Constitutional Court. You all know about the bombing of the World Trade Center in US. There were 4 passenger aircrafts which were hijacked. 2 of them ripped into the World Trade Center. 1 hit the Pentagon. And the last one landed in Pittsburgh in view of the intervention of the passengers on the flight. Thereafter, 2 years thereafter, this happened in 2001. 2 years thereafter, in 2003, a person with unsound mind, he took an aircraft, went into the air, and then started threatening people that unless he is permitted to make a call to US, he is going to crash his aircraft into a high-rise building. Ultimately, he was brought down by telling him that it's all right, we'll permit you to make the call, and then it was found that he was mentally unsound. That made the German government think that it is required that an act has to be made. The Air Safety Act was made, in which there was a provision which enabled the government to take a decision to shoot down an aircraft when it is hijacked and when terrorists are there in the aircraft, because if they are permitted to crash into high-rise buildings or in residential places, there might be more number of deaths than the number of persons who are in the aircraft itself. Thereby, according to the Act, a decision can be taken sacrificing the lives of innocent persons who are traveling in the aircraft. That provision was challenged in the German Constitutional Court. And the German Constitutional Court set aside the provision, declared it to be contrary to human dignity. Human dignity is protected under the German Constitution, which cannot be rescinded. The logic that was adopted in the judgment is that a human being cannot be a means to an end. A human being and his dignity is the end by itself. You cannot sacrifice the lives of innocent persons who are victims and not perpetrators for the purpose of saving the lives of certain persons, which is also not sure. You don't know. This is indeterminate. The hijackers might not crash, and even if they crash, they might not be able to hit anybody. But for that purpose, you cannot sacrifice the lives of any individual, is what the court said. So when you are taking a choice as to who should be treated, who should not be treated, these are certain difficult decisions that would arise. And what is to be kept in mind is that the dignity of each individual has to be protected under Article 21. Though not strictly connected with this, I am reminded of another case which happened in 1894. This was more than 125 years back. This is a case of Dudley. There were 4 castaways for committing a crime in a ship. They were put in a small boat and then left about 1,000 miles from Cape Good Hope. They were given some food which lasted for about 4 or 5 days. And thereafter they killed a small turtle, and then they survived on the turtle for another 4 days. And thereafter 2 of them, Dudley and another person, decided that the youngest of them, whose name is Richard Parker, should be killed, and then they can feed on him and survive for a few more days, during which time another vessel might pass on that route, and then they can be saved. The third person did not accept, but the 2 thought that it's high time that they carry their plan. They had families to feed, whereas Richard Parker was only 17, 18 years old, so he is very weak and he can be sacrificed. When Richard Parker was taking rest, they cut his throat, and then they survived on Richard Parker's for about 4 or 5 days, when a passing ship picked them up, and then 2 of them were tried for manslaughter. They were convicted. The matter reached the Queen's Bench Division. Lord Coleridge said that necessity cannot be a defense for a crime. Their conviction was upheld, and their sentence of death was also upheld, though later the executive commuted the sentence to about 6 months. The logic that was adopted in that case is that you cannot commit a crime on the basis of necessity, on the ground that I don't have means, I can't commit a theft. I am bringing in necessity also here because it might be that somebody might say that you look at the necessity of saving certain people for the purpose of ensuring that the medical need reaches them, and then in the process you are sacrificing other people. These are difficult decisions which have to be taken as and when the situation arises. But one thing that I can say is that the Constitution protects the dignity of every individual, and the state has to make all efforts to protect the human dignity of every citizen. Now let us talk about the international covenants on this human dignity, on this pandemic. We have the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And this covenant has been inserted into the definition of human rights in the Protection of Human Rights Act. The definition of human rights is refers to embodiments, refers to international covenants also. Thereafter, in the PUCL judgment, the Supreme Court said that for protection of human rights, even international covenants and the guidelines and the directions that are issued would be binding. normally international covenants are not binding unless municipal law is made. But this international covenant, because India is a signatory and it has been brought into the Human Rights, brought into the Protection of Human Rights Act, is to be followed. Insofar as the restriction on movement is concerned, this was a dispute which has been arising on and off when certain countries have been taking advantage of certain situations and then saying that, oh, there's some problem here on health, so we are going to ban all assemblies, no meeting should be conducted, nobody should move, etc. for other ends. So 1984, there was a Syracuse Convention which was accepted by the UN bodies, where they said that restrictions in the interest of public health can be made by countries only in cases where the restrictions are lawful, restrictions are necessary, and restrictions are proportionate. These are the three principles which have to be kept in mind when certain restrictions of human rights are made by any country in cases of health emergency. Now, there are certain suggestions that are made by a committee by taking into account these covenants and the Human Rights Watch, which have to be taken note of by the government. They have dealt with different situations. One is right to travel. Right to travel and the restrictions that are placed on people coming out of their houses has been dealt with differently in different countries, depending upon the situation which has to be taken care of by each country to ensure that this deadly disease doesn't spread its tentacles. The decisions taken by the government have to be tested on proportionality as and when the situation arises. The suggestion that is made by the Committee on the Convention is that let the countries decide, different countries decide as to what extent these restrictions can be placed upon the individuals in their right to movement. Healthcare is one aspect which has been suggested, where suggestions have been made. And healthcare without discrimination is something which has been stressed by the committee. As I was speaking earlier about xenophobia, people from China being treated differently in various countries, there were a large number of cases that have been reported in the West, where people were not treating the Chinese properly, saying that they are the virus, they are carrying virus. So on the basis of race or religion, status of an individual, there cannot be discrimination in healthcare being provided to the citizens. What about livelihood, food, shelter and clothing? This has also been mentioned by the committee, saying that the deprived classes would be finding it very difficult to survive. So their needs have to be taken care of, and I'm sure that the state is doing its best to ensure that everybody is properly fed and taken care of. And in any event, it is their duty to do so. People in prisons have received separate attention from the committee. Prisons, as we all know, are places where, especially in India, they are overcrowded. Do prisoners have their rights? The fundamental rights of all the prisoners are intact. In spite of their conviction, the rights have not gone anywhere. Everybody has a human right. So, to ensure that this disease doesn't spread in overcrowded prisoners, the Supreme Court passed an order in a suo motu writ petition in March, by which the state governments were directed to appoint a committee, which will study the feasibility of releasing prisoners who are undergoing sentences for offences say, for example, below 7 years, so that the overcrowding is reduced. They are given interim bail, and after a period of 2 months or 3 months, they are brought back when situation returns to normalcy. Most of the states, excepting Bihar and Jharkhand, where they say that their jails are not overcrowded, have taken decisions, and then people have been released. There were certain problems that arose later about people who were released not being able to reach their hometowns. Even that has been taken care of. Women and children also needs a special mention here. The number of Domestic Violence Act cases have arisen, and mostly health workers are women. They need special attention. They have to be taken care of. I have read in the newspapers recently that the state of Tamil Nadu has decided that the officials of the protection homes start visiting the persons who make complaints. They have to be taken care of in this time, which is really bad insofar as health is concerned. Having told you about the fundamental rights, having spoken about the restrictions that are placed by the government to improve public health, which is a duty of the state, I should say that whenever this issue arises as to whether the rights of the individuals have to be protected, one thing that has to be kept in mind is about the duties of the citizens. When you are talking of communitarian human dignity, when you are talking of public health, it is necessary that all of us follow the instructions that are given to us to maintain social distancing and to also prevent the spread of this deadly disease. There is one more thing which I want to tell you, that people who can survive by themselves, who also have the means, should find a way of helping others who need your help, who would be in a better position if you're kind to them. I would end this lecture by referring to what is said in Tirukkural about freedom from epidemic being one of the 5 jewels required for a good country. I thank the Madras Bar Association for giving me this opportunity to share my ideas, and I would request all of you to stay safe. Thank you.